Hello everyone, this is Benjamin Ramirez on another video. I'm doing 12 today, possibly 12 and 13. Um, so the first move obviously with Sicilian is e4, c5. I am going over a b4, which is more of a gambit line accepted. Because obviously if you were looking for a new opening for the Sicilian that is unknown to players, then this would be good for you because you can have an advantage, a book advantage, obviously. Now, after here, we're going over d6 right now, and I like a3. In the past few videos, that's what I've been going over. Now, after a3, you can see a6 is the next one. If someone plays a6, you just simply push the pawn. That's what I would do here. According to the Stockfish app, the only move black can play that would be knight to e5. They don't recommend knight to b8. It doesn't fully explain why, but it puts it at almost a 2-point negative disadvantage. So apparently you can simply capture the pawn, and after that, the only moves that seem okay or decent are developing moves. So if you're at a 2-point advantage and all he can do is attempt to develop, then my assumption is it's only good for if all you can do is develop, then my only assumption is bad because you have possibly more space and more piece advantage. I mean, you can even attempt to call a check this way. He can't take it. I mean, if you just wanted to be, you can actually even do that because he can't capture because he would lose the rook. He would have to defend. So, but the problem with that is if you capture, your 2-point advantage becomes a 1. So it's not really recommended, but that's like a small trick if you're playing, bullet or whatever. I wouldn't recommend it though. But according to them, it's basically an advantage for white. So you probably won't see that. They believe this is the best move. After here, I would simply, if they give you opportunity to capture this pawn without consequence, I usually just accept it, just because it's an extra pawn. And from here, you're pretty much a little bit better off. There's not really much black can do. He can simply develop if he wanted, and you can just continue developing. From here, he can also capture if he wanted to, and if he captured, you just take back with the queen. But you're pretty much a little bit better off. You have your rook obviously has a little semi-open file. You have a lot more space with your pawns. You got the pawn back, so you don't have a pawn deficit like most of the openings in this. And it's just, overall, it's pretty well. After here, they recommend if knight to f6, they recommend rook to a3. So that's pretty, it's okay. And you might also see g6, which is another move you might see here. And if you see that, it recommends bishop to b2 is what they recommend. So it's pretty well. I mean, obviously you're not going to get a free piece because he can move the knight, but you never know. Like I said, this is not going to reach the top tier yet unless a lot of people start playing it and trying it, and people start seeing promising results. Then more and more people might actually play it. So I've been successful with it, so that's why I'm going over these. Now, you can also see this move here, h6. Now, I would think that h6 might be more likely than a6 only because of the knight. And after that, I would still play the same move. Knight to b8 is also, in this situation, 2-point difference, which is bad, probably for the same reasons. Knight to a4 is pretty much is considered a blunder. You can capture, and then the knight really has nowhere to go. So they recommend the same move here. So they both recommend the same thing for a6 or h6. The only difference is that it's not, for h6, it's not a 2-point advantage, it's a 1-point advantage for white. So it's not entirely as horrible. I would still capture the pawn here. However, Stockfish doesn't think it's the best move. They believe knight takes e is the best move here. And also, you can play bishop to b2 is another move they like better. And another move they like better is knight to d4. So they like knight to d4, bishop to b2, and knight to d4 a little bit better. I prefer the pawn one. So that's just my preference. It's not I guess if you play like chess and you know what center piece losses, it might be like center piece loss like 10. So it's not even a mistake or an inaccuracy, but it's not the top move that this app shows. So I prefer to take pawns when I can, just because I know that there's different advantages that are possible with space, timing, momentum, and so forth. If I don't know fully how to take advantage of that, I'm not going to play the moves as 100% as it shows as best. So basically, later on, as I develop my understanding of why certain moves why this might be considered better, I guess he takes back, and when I understand why, then I may consider it. And apparently you take the pawn anyways. And I guess if you take the pawn first, that makes sense. This is a little better because he has to take it back, and then you can take this and his pawn's messed up. If you take the pawn first, he can actually capture, and his pawn structure is fine. So that actually makes a lot of sense now that I went over it. Me personally, I normally just do this if I don't understand why something might be a little better, because I'd rather get a piece. So I guess you can do it either which way, but if you see this and you capture, you can mess up his pawn structure and still get the pawn back. So that's pretty nice. But overall, it's pretty much very similar to the other one. You can't obviously if you capture, he captures, you capture, or if you don't capture, you don't have this threat where you may take the rook. So that might be why it was like an extra point difference for the A side compared to the H. Is maybe there was some extra going on there. And instead of that, so I guess I'll do 3 parts, because these are pretty simple, very basic to go over. They just basically lost momentum by going A or H6 here. So it's not really recommended. They don't like it too much. Bishop d7 is also possible here. That's the next one that I was going to go over. If I see that, I would simply just capture. And that's why I said a lot of these are very similar. You have a very similar setup. And that's the most thing that I enjoy about this opening, is that most of these are extremely similar. Knight will take here. Usually. That's the recommended move. Anything else is pretty much kind of bad. So they recommend capturing with the knight. Now let's say they don't capture with the knight. Let's say they play a6, for example. For some reason, you can simply play d5, and capturing becomes bad, because after here, what's going to happen with the knight? So a6 first would actually be bad for black. They recommend the capture here, which is what I normally, which is what I see a lot, is either capturing with the knight or the bishop at some point. So it leads to a very similar position that we're used to seeing. Now, if you develop this way, it will develop and actually target a piece, which would force him to move back. So he captured a piece and moved back, and now you have a bishop there, and it's your turn. It's not entirely bad for black. It's like a small slight advantage for white. So you don't see the issues with the bishop trying to force the king not to castle on the king side here because of the pawn structure is different. So that's the actual advantage for black that black didn't have before. I would still push this here. D5 is a very common and normal move in this kind of opening at some point when they play D6. And I obviously would capture here. Now, let's say he doesn't play the knight move. For whatever reason, let's say he doesn't play the knight move to D5. Let's say he plays it back instead. It goes back to a 2-point lead for white. So he's almost basically forced to ruin his pawn structure. The lead that you have with something like that is usually development, and that lead does not last unless you understand how to take advantage of it. And taking advantage of it does not mean you're going to automatically win a piece over it. It means you basically develop your pieces, gain extra space and time. You can play something like, knight to c3 here, or e5, just to keep trying to get things going, I mean, he can capture, you can capture back. He can't kick the knight because of the check here. That's going to be bad. That's going to be really bad. You can just simply capture. That's horrible for black. So if you it looks a little weird, but if you did this here, there's a small trick there with that. That's like a normal issue. However, if he did capture and you capture back, hopefully your opponent doesn't play this move. I mean, maybe hopefully you would hope that, but the main best move for black is to basically try to get his bishop out there and his knight so he can castle. That's pretty much the best thing for black. And your job is basically to do everything you can to gain your pieces out, your momentum, and so forth, trying to get your stuff going. Now, they were recommending two moves here, which is kind of both, I think, a little weird. One is queen over here. Obviously, you're threatening checkmate. He can easily defend against it. So it's not, it's easily defendable. However, you can always play it. And another one they have is bishop to c5 here. So after he moves his pawn up, bishop to c5 is a different move that they recommend as well. This one doesn't have the same type of threats, so I probably would play this one here, just to, make them. When you play online, you play with a lot of moves that, when you're playing rapid and blitz, usually you want to make them think, so make them lose their clock. So I think that's why I've been extremely successful in bullet and blitz with these openings, is because if you can keep finding ways to threaten them, and which they're not used to seeing, because this opening's not really, they might play proper moves here and there. However, it's going to take them extra time to do so because they don't have pre-planned moves like you would after watching these. So I hope you enjoyed. So that was 3 parts. I'm not 100% sure. I am considering on going over instead of A3, going over D5 instead, because it's more aggressive. I'm considering it, but then you just learned a whole bunch of A3, and then for what, you know? If you're going to be playing a whole different move, what was the point of A3, right? So I think I might not. I think I would just try to keep it as simple as possible for white and keep the whole pattern going. So I'm probably not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with A3 for everybody and for myself. That way, yeah, I'm going to do that. I have notes for on it. I'll just keep my notes. But for video purposes, I want to keep everything extremely simple, basic, and very straightforward, and then show a few small threats that are possible if your opponent makes a mistake early on. So that's 3 parts. So hope you guys enjoy. I'm trying to lump them up a little bit so you can review and look at them. I do use Stockfish to help make sure that I'm fully accurate in the way I'm creating this. So that's awesome for technology. So thank you guys, and subscribe, like, share with your friends if you want to, or you can just not share it with them and play it against them. So alright, enjoy.